The race for San Diego mayor has 15 candidates. If you were planning to file, it's too late now. Good evening, I'm Michael Marcotte. Welcome to Full Focus Friday, a look at the top stories this week. The deadline to file to run for mayor of San Diego was at 5 o'clock this evening, and now the race is on. KPBS reporter Alison St John is here to tell us who is on deck to be the next mayor. We also have with us tonight KPBS legal reporter Amita Sharma with the latest on the City Hall corruption trial. We welcome back Moran from the San Diego Union-Tribune to explain a case heard by the state Supreme Court this week on domestic partner rights. And we have Terry Summers from the Union-Tribune with the latest on stem cell research. So welcome to you all. Let's start with San Diego City Hall. On this make-or-break day for mayoral candidates, the city got more bad news from Wall Street. The Fitch Ratings Service downgraded $2 billion in San Diego bonds. Fitch cited the lack of 2 annual audits, ongoing political conflict among city leaders, and the uncertainty surrounding the upcoming election. Allison, here we are. Let's focus on that election. Mayor Dick Murphy announced he's stepping down in July. 2 weeks later, we have the special election, and now we know who is running.
Yes, it's amazing that some of those people didn't decide just not to file when they heard that devastating financial news today. But 15 people out of the 29 people who took out papers showed up at the city clerk's office today and filed and said, yes, we want to run. There's various names that we're pretty familiar with. Of course, there's City Councilwoman Donna Fry, former police chief Jerry Sanders. Then we have CEO Steve Francis, and we have Pat Shea, who jumped in at the last minute, an attorney, and Richard Ryder, who is a libertarian that many people
certainly these 5 have a lot of name recognition. Let's dwell on a couple of these for a moment just to talk about them. Donna Fry, a presumed front runner. I mean, some would say she should have been mayor in the last November election.
That's right. Some say if everyone had filled in those bubbles that she would have been mayor. So she's been through an election already. She has that name recognition. Virtually anyone who's paying attention to city politics would be familiar with Donna Fry already. So she, as of some of the polls that have come out, has about 30% in the initial stages.
So who's done this polling? Is it private polling?
So the polling has been done by the Republican Hispanic Association, I believe, and that is a private poll. So you have to wonder, you'll have to wait and see, I think, as the race gets going as to quite whether that polling is going to shift. It's bound to shift as the other people get more name recognition.
Pat Shea is an intriguing name. This is somebody who is married to Diane Scipione, the major whistleblower on the pension fund scandal, and is a very close ally of the city attorney Mike Aguirre, who is probably somebody that the next mayor is going to have to get along with if you're going to be successful. What's his take here?
What's his bag? Why did he decide that he had something to offer that no one else did? He is the only one who is saying the city needs to declare bankruptcy, and he was the attorney who helped in Orange County. Agencies.
Somehow I'm having a hard time hearing this as a campaign slogan. Follow me into bankruptcy.
Yeah. Well, he claims that there's a lot of people inside and out of the city who have urged him to run, who seem to believe that this is the best way out of the city's problems. Even today with the news from Fitch, his response was, well, he thinks that the city will come out of bankruptcy looking financially strong faster than if it tries to plow through all the legal situations.
Greg mentioned Pat Shea's connection with Mike Aguirre. He's part of that posse that kind of swooped in on City Hall, a reformist kind of attitude. Do you think that alliance with Aguirre could play out somehow in this campaign?
For Pat Shea?
Yeah.
Well, Aguirre's, of course, saying he's not endorsing anyone, and he has in the past been very positive about Donna Fry. But it is true that Aguirre has also said not bankruptcy, but he would like to put the city into receivership, which is like the next best thing. So the two are definitely on the same page in some ways.
Well, does Pat Shea's entrance into the race split Donna Fry's support in any way? Because they have said some similar things all along, and I don't know this to be a fact, but it seems to me that there was some kind of alliance, at least in the beginning, between Diane Scipione and Donna Fry. I mean, Donna Fry has really been rooting for Diane Scipione to get back on that pension board. So what does that do to this alliance? Does it do anything?
Well, I think that's one of the questions. He said, Pat Shea said that he was waiting to see if there was somebody else who was going to run who would have taken up the cause, I guess, of bankruptcy. And Carl DeMaio, of course, was someone who came close to saying that. Richard Ryder has been saying he stood in front of the bankruptcy court before, and when he was announcing that he was going to run, but he said that he would rather privatize city services before going into bankruptcy. So maybe Pat Shea has been sort of watching to see what the candidates who are coming forward are saying, and he just feels like this is an option that has to be part of the mix. But you're right, it is, I think this whole election we're going to have to watch who is taking votes from who, because it isn't just who's the front runner.
And what about Jerry Sanders? I mean, he has tons of name recognition, but do people really see him in that role, in that leadership role of actually leading an entire city as opposed to a department?
Well, he has led a couple of nonprofit organizations out of very, very bad financial situations, the Red Cross and the United Way. So he has a track record of doing that. He has a lot of respect. He just went and was appointed to some international Red Cross board, so those organizations obviously feel he's done a magnificent job.
Let's don't leave out on his resume a former police chief, so he's managed one of the largest agencies in city government.
Which is the primary function of any city. You know, when you're talking about cutting the budget, public safety sort of remains. So he's got that experience. He was the person who brought in all that neighborhood policing, which a lot of people felt was really valuable and turned things around.
And you wonder if he's going to have the inside track for the POA endorsement, which is very, very crucial.
Police Officers Association, the union endorsements are going to be rather
very
critical
in this. In a short race, you need a lot of money, a lot of people to get your name out. I'm intrigued by Ryder's candidacy in a way. I mean, this is somebody who's very familiar to San Diego voters. His message of shrinking the government, privatizing it. I mean, does he have a better chance at maybe of that message resonating now with people than?
Well, exactly. I mean, he has run for office before and not got very far, but he makes the point this time that he says, I'm not a fringe candidate this time because of the extraordinary circumstances. Yes. My message may be more popular to the general public. And, you know, he's basically said, I'm going to keep taxes down, and no one else has the same record as I have of managing to challenge taxes. He does not have a lot of political legislative experience at all, but he is determined to.
You have to admire Ryder, I guess, you know, I mean, coming off the sidelines where he's free to be a critic and jumping right into the fray.
So he's had a consistent message over the years, and you kind of wonder if this is sort of his time in a way, in a kind of roughly analogous way that it was Aguirre's time last election, somebody who seems like all the forces kind of come together to line up with what.
And only in San Diego would we expect a libertarian, you know, maybe to zoom toward, toward the front of the pack. I do want to ask you about Steve Francis. We talked about him in a previous show. A new name on the scene to many of us, but rich.
Well, he's lived in San Diego 18 years or so, and started a business here, which is now pretty big. It's on the New York Stock Exchange. It employs 7,000 people, probably a multimillionaire, prepared to throw quite a bit of his own money into the race. He's also saying that he can solve the problems without raising taxes. You know, he's saying that he'll bring the unions to the table. He's saying that Aguirre is doing a good job of shaking up the establishment, and that actually it is going to be necessary to roll back the illegal pension benefits. Virtually all the candidates say it's going to be necessary to roll back the illegal pension benefits, but they have different strategies for how to put leverage on the unions to do that.
So are the unions, I mean, how are they going to reconcile endorsing any one of these candidates with a rollback in their benefits?
I think that's a good question. None of them are actually saying, you know, we have to leave the unions alone. Even Donna Fry, who is traditionally their supporter, is saying everyone has to take some share of the pain. And, you know, when you ask her, what are you going to do about the unions? She basically says, well, these guys are my friends. I'm going to sit down and talk to them honestly. And once the real figures are out, she believes that they will come around to, you know, play the game in a way that will help the city come out of it.
And there's also just the financial struggle that the city is in, the setting of the budget and so on. And it looks like it's going to get worse before it gets better. The downgrade and the Fitch rating today, and Lamont Ewell said he expects perhaps further downgrades before
Moody's would go the same way, because Standard & Poor's has suspended the rating. Yeah, I mean, there's a real feeling of things unraveling. You know, as I talked to other journalists around downtown, there is this real feeling that things are beginning to slide here. Yeah.
The city really hasn't touched bottom yet. They're just sinking, and you got to wonder where that floor.
Right, and the DA's office says that there might be more charges brought forward.
Correct.
And the U.S. Attorney's Office still hasn't wrapped up its investigation. The SEC hasn't wrapped up its investigation.
There's a showdown due next Tuesday on the salary and pension ordinance, where we don't know whether the city attorney is just going to balk and say, no, I will not sign off on this.
So who wants this job?
And what's the recipe?
15 people.
And what's the recipe for winning candidacy? You know, I mean, we have experience, there's money, you know, we're talking about endorsements.
People who have no name recognition even have time to build that name recognition, and if the people of San Diego really want to, at a time like this, give them a chance, an unknown a chance.
Well, the last guy through the doors this afternoon, who just slipped under the wire 10 minutes before they closed the doors, he's an example of someone I had never heard of, but he's a Green Party candidate. Let's see, his name was Kent Mesplay, and he said that the reason he wants to run is not because he necessarily wants more votes, but because he wants to dynamize some elements of the electorate, like young people who've been completely turned off by all this. So, I mean, there could be some very valuable roles of some of these candidates bringing in different constituencies that haven't in the past been interested in
new ideas. Well, thank you, Alison. I appreciate that. Turning to other City Hall news, the corruption trial of Councilman Ralph Nzunza and Michael Zucchet continued this week. Testimony focused on the role of an FBI informant. KPBS reporter Amita Sharma has been covering the trial. And Amita, we're 2 weeks into this trial now. What were some of the highlight moments this week?
Well, the highlight moments this week were that the defense continued to grill FBI informant Tony Montana. He was the mole for the FBI. He's the one that wore the body wire when he met with and spoke to the key players in this case, the key players being strip club owner Michael Ghilardi, his club manager John D'Antino, Councilman Ralph Nzunza, Michael Zucchet, and the lobbyist Lance Malone. So, you know, these defense attorneys cross-examined Tony Montana and tried to get him to say tried to let the jury know that, from their perspective, this guy was the instigator of this. He was the driving force behind this investigation. He misled the councilman into believing that police were actually in favor of abolishing these no-touch rules, and that the councilmen were not aware that police were not in favor of abolishing the no-touch rules.
And this goes back to the original defense line that this was entrapment. I mean, they're suggesting that the government kind of created this scenario.
Yeah.
How did Montana hold up on cross-examination?
Montana, you know, he held up really well. He's this real colorful character. He's a bodybuilder. He owns a gym. He's a private trainer. And he's been an informant for the FBI for a heck of a long time. And, you know, there were times that he really frustrated the defense by asking them to repeat the question or, you know, coming across as if he just didn't understand what they were saying. And so after the cross-examination, it was, you know, you wondered whether the jury was buying what the defense was saying or if they actually recalled, you know, 4 or 5 days of continued playing of these secret recordings that the government had of conversations with Nzunza, with Malone, with Councilman Zucchet, where it's very clear that Tony Montana is not really driving this investigation, that he is actually taking his orders from Michael Ghilardi, from John D'Antino, from Lance Malone, and that Zucchet and Nzunza are aware of some of the activities.
You mentioned the tapes. This week, the court actually began releasing audio and video evidence to the media, and we have a clip, and it shows Montana and some of the other characters, so why don't we show that, and you can tell us what's happening here.
Okay. So this is surveillance video taken after a luncheon meeting at the Grant Grill in downtown San Diego, and you've got Councilman Ralph Nzunza right there, and Councilman Zucchet's back is to the camera, and Lance Malone is the gentleman in the blue shirt, and Tony Montana is the big burly guy. Anyway, this is right after this lunch meeting at the Grant Grill where the four of them are strategizing on how to repeal no-touch rules, and one of the strategies that they're coming up with is to devise these measures, come up with these measures that make it look like they're hurting the adult entertainment industry, and that would be a means to get this back at the council, back before the council, up for discussion, and they'll have this whole package of measures like increasing the distance between strip clubs and schools and churches, and once they've got this package sort of supported by the council, then they'll slip in no touch at the last minute, and it will kind of, you know, because everyone will focus on these other measures that are hurting the industry, it'll escape, the no-touch part will escape media of scrutiny, and they'll get it passed. And
It's not that unusual. I mean,
it's
people
not
do
unusual.
that
It does
to get things passed all the time, don't they?
Well, and they've been accepting campaign contributions all along.
Accepting campaign contributions when they were running for office, and prosecutors say this was part of the deal. Ralph Insunza is heard on the tape saying, help me get Zucchett elected, help me get Charles Lewis elected back in 2002, and we can make this thing go.
The tapes are interesting because what we've heard and seen so far, I understand, is there's not some bombshell tape where somebody says, "Give me the money and I'll vote," or something like that. This is more like, it sounds like kind of death by 1,000 cuts. These are many hours of tapes.
That's why this investigation is not simple. That's why this case is not simple. It's very complex because it's a plan that develops over a period of time, over 2 years, and it changes along the way. And you don't really know which way it's going to go. But every now and then, there are little tidbits that you hear, and you think, oh, wait, what happened? Like, for instance, 2 weeks ago, John D'Antino is heard saying on the tape that, yeah, we gave them $25,000, but they only recorded $4,500. Well, now that was said within the context of a Union-Tribune article that had been published saying that Councilman Insunza and candidate Charles Lewis had received $4,500 from Michael Ghilardi. So now the prosecutor, I asked him about it later, and I said, so who's they? Who were they referring to? He said, well, I can't say that. I can't say that. I said, well, are you going to clarify that during your direct examination? And he said, I don't know. And so I'm imagining, I don't know this for sure, but I'm imagining that when John D'Antino gets up on that stand, and he will, he's going to be testifying in this case, that he will be asked, who were you referring to when you said we gave them $25,000, but they only recorded $4,500. So every now and then you hear things.
I'm interested. Montagna is a real key figure in this, and he's an early witness in a long case, and he was up there for 8 days. You heard all the cross-examination. Was the defense able, in your estimation, to, he was very effective at parrying some of the questions, but were they able to start implanting this idea that this guy, was an instigator, that this was an entrapment, or were they able to deflect that pretty well?
I don't think that he was able to deflect those questions entirely. I think they did make some headway because, they did play snippets of conversation where Tony Montagna appears to be saying, so what's going to happen next? It depends on how the jury interprets this, but he kind of makes it appear like we've got to move this forward. Now he's doing this at the behest of the FBI, who wants to see, I guess, what the councilmen are going to do next. So he's making it appear that Russ Bristol is getting anxious about what's going to happen next.
Well, speaking of what's going to happen next, what is going to happen next on the stand? What is going to happen next
is right now we have Leonard Davey. He's a special agent with the FBI, and he sort of oversaw Tony Montagna. He's up on the stand. He took the stand yesterday. He will continue testifying next week. And basically, he's describing the genesis of this investigation, which actually started back in 1999 for a wholly different reason. And he's just kind of taking the jury through stages. And meanwhile, the two councilmen have to leave their jobs at City Hall and go over there and sit in court. Well, it's related to your case because if these councilmen are indicted, if they're convicted, then Michael Zucchett is acting mayor.
Good. Thank you, Amita. On to another important legal case. This one is playing out in California Supreme Court. It concerns a local lesbian couple who sued the Bernardo Heights Country Club. The club refused to grant the same membership benefits to the same-sex couple as it grants to married couples. And Greg Moran, who are the plaintiffs, and what are they basing this case on?
Well, the two women, B. Birgit Kopke and Kendall French, they're longtime companions. They are registered domestic partners. They are beneficiaries of each other's will. They have taken they're fully committed in a relationship, have been for a long time. Ms. Kopke is an avid golfer and joined the Bernardo Heights Country Club in 1987, and for a period of years tried to convince the club to allow her partner, Ms. French, to golf with her, to have the same membership privileges that spouses of married heterosexual couples can have at the club. The club has consistently refused, rebuffed her, and several years ago she sued, alleging that the policy, the club rule, which does not extend membership benefits to unmarried people, is a form of what's called marital status discrimination, which is whether you're single, divorced, widowed, or something like that, and also amounts to sex sex discrimination and sexual orientation discrimination. The case has worked through they've lost actually in the trial court, mostly lost in the appeals court, and the Supreme Court took the case. And it's very interesting because it cuts across a couple of interesting issues. One is, do we formally expand protection of the state from the state's Civil Rights Act, the Unruh Act, to this category of marital status, which would affect all kinds of people and all businesses in the state. That's kind of one track the case is moving on. And the second one is kind of the larger issue that everybody's keeping an eye on, which is how is this court going to deal with the ultimate issue of the legality or illegality of same-sex marriages. So
I wondered if there was any difference of opinion within the club. I mean, is the club united that they don't want them in, or is there some people who are actually, rooting for them?
In the record, there are some people who appear to side or be sympathetic with the couple, but I mean, they have alleged, Ms. Copy and Ms. French, that they have been harassed and subject to some very barbed and some very wicked comments from not only club members but some of the club directors.
Domestic partner legislation in California is somewhat under attack right now, isn't it?
It is. The domestic partnership law, which was passed a couple of years ago, went into full effect on January 1st of this year, and just recently a group is trying to gather signatures for a constitutional amendment that would peel back or pare back some of that law. It gives essentially full legal benefits short of marriage to registered domestic partners.
Is there any legislation that would take its cue from this case?
Well, it could be. I mean, if the court were to rule, for instance, that marital status discrimination is covered under the Civil Rights Act, that could lead to a series of statutory laws that the legislature would pass. If they don't, I'm not quite sure. But
Greg, we're running short on time, but we'll check back with you then when we get a ruling out of the state Supreme Court. Okay, thank you. I do want to talk about another big story in the news this week: stem cell research. Lawmakers in both our nation's capital and in our state capital were discussing it. And Terry Summers, why stem cell research? Why is this coming before Congress now?
Well, in August of 2001, President Bush went on television and held a news conference and said that he was limiting the amount of the federal funding that could be used for embryonic stem cell research. And he is one of a large contingent in the United States who believe that embryos that are used, which are in stem cell research, which are groups of just days-old embryos, and they're just a group of 100 to 200 cells. A lot of people believe that those are alive, and they are destroyed. The cells are destroyed in stem cell research, and he feels that federal money should not be used to destroy these embryos.
And of course, that decision was a stimulus for California's $3 billion.
For Proposition 71, right? And so stem cell, the issue of stem cell research has been bubbling up all over the United States. A number of states were kind of got the impetus from California and were interested in starting their own measures and trying to find some funding. And
bandwagon effect taking place here.
And last year there was a letter that passed through the House and the Senate, and it had a lot of bipartisan support, and it was urging the president to lighten up on the stem cell restrictions. And so that kind of led to legislation that was proposed in the House and passed this week, and it received bipartisan approval. 50 Republicans voted for it, and but 14 Democrats opposed it. And what it does is allows, if it is approved, it would allow embryos that are essentially left over at in vitro fertilization clinics and may otherwise be discarded. It allows them to be used for stem cell research. And the thought is, well, if you're going to get rid of them anyway, you're destroying them, so why not allow them to be used for stem cell research? And
Bush is threatening to veto this bill.
Bush is threatening to veto, and now it's going over to the House, to the Senate. And Senator Arlen Specter has said that this week, in response to the president's threat to veto, he said that he has the votes that he needs to override the veto. They need 200 votes to get the 2/3 approval in the House, and no one knows if they really have that. They didn't have it certainly when they had the vote this week.
But it's just interesting to see the strong support coming out for stem cell research. Very quickly in California, there is a bill that would kind of tweak the stem cell constitutional amendment that we put in place. What's the upshot of that?
Well, that's very interesting because the sponsor of that bill, one of the sponsors, is Deborah Ortiz, who's a Sacramento Democrat, who was actually the first mastermind behind Proposition 71. She was sitting at a restaurant with a number of scientists and talking about how do we get past the Bush limitations, and she thought, well, let's bring it to the voters of California. And so now this bill has passed, and she campaigned and helped get it passed, but now she feels it doesn't have enough public oversight and legislative oversight.
Involved in
well,
this.
she said, you know, if people don't like the way the money is spent, they're essentially going to look at the legislature and blame the legislature because they see the legislature as being responsible for how the money is spent. So she would like the legislature to have some more control.
And it looks like they're brokering some kind of an understanding, but this would have to receive voter approval.
She wants to get it on the ballot in November if there's a special election, and she's going to have to get 2/3 approval in both houses, and she doesn't know if she will.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, that's all the time we have for tonight's show. But you can learn more about the race for mayor and the other stories we've talked about tonight by going to the website, kpbs.org. And we enjoy hearing from you. You can write to us at the address on your screen. My thanks to our guests, Alison St John, Greg Moran, Terry Summers, and Amita Sharma. Be sure to tune in Monday for a Memorial Day special on the sacrifices of local veterans. That's Monday's Full Focus. For KPBS, I'm Michael Marcotte. Have a great Memorial Day weekend.